So a little bit of an awkward start to this video. I've been working on this little by little for the last like 2.5 years. It's always been low priority, just kind of one of those things that I worked on when I went to the track. But the goal was to get some video of me at the track and then compare it to myself on the simulator. So I filmed an intro years ago, and at some point I deleted it. I didn't realize it. I also had an outro that I apparently deleted at some point, as well as a bunch of other footage. So I'm gonna try to salvage this video, and unfortunately, it's probably not gonna be as good as I had originally planned. But let's get into it. So really, the initial goal of this video was to recreate the HPD experience within Assetto Corsa the night before I went to the track. So I had never driven on Lightning before. Most of the track days I had done were at Thunderbolt, but I have seen enough videos on the track. My dad had done the extreme experience thing one year as a gift, and I saw the track then. I kind of knew the layout. I knew the overall direction of the course, but I had never actually been on it. I didn't know what's what, where the bumps are, where the curbs are, what curbs you should hit, what curbs you shouldn't hit, stuff like that. And obviously, whenever the scan was made for the track is going to be in that condition as opposed to how it was in 2024 when I actually got out to the track. And just to get this out of the way, the simulator is set up with a Logitech G29 and then Fanatec CSL or Fanatic, I've heard it said, pedals. So we do have, it's the load cell, brake pedal, regular gas, and then the clutch pedal. We have a shifter, but I didn't use that for the majority of the sessions because it's actually really hard for me to heel toe this. Just technique issues, skill issue for sure. So in typical HPD fashion, we did 6 20-minute sessions, and basically I would just sit there and grind 20 minutes on the simulator and then stop. You would get like a 1 to 2 hour break in real life. I didn't take a break that long. I usually tried to keep it like 30 minutes or so just because it would take me literally all night to complete this video if I took full 1 to 2 hour breaks in between every session. I didn't watch any clips, any replays, any data, or anything between sessions. I just went out. Fastest lap time was all I cared about. I didn't do anything other than that. Again, trying to keep it fairly consistent with how I would approach a normal HPDE. Obviously, you could look at data. You could look at in-car video. You could do things in real life. I didn't do any of that. I tried to keep this fairly simple. It was my first time on this course, so I did kind of want to be a little more prepared, I guess. Go in a little more calm. Don't go in feeling like I know everything. Kind of go in with an open mind and feel everything out, and then go from there. At this point, and really now, I am still fairly novice to the whole HPDE and driving on track. I've got like 10 events total, so this seemed like a good practice, and then we could get good data to compare and contrast. So let's go ahead and talk about the variables that are totally out of our control. Obviously, in the simulator, the weather conditions are perfect. It is the right temperature, the track is perfectly dry, there's no dust, there's no debris, there's no anything. Everything is perfect. There is also no real risk, financial, physical, or otherwise. If you blow an engine up in the simulator, it's not the end of the world. You don't get a big bill from the track. You don't get a big bill from the mechanic. You don't have to find a way home. You are just good and ready to go. The car can't really break. And then the unknowns are sort of, we don't know what brakes are on the car. We don't know what tires are on the car. We don't know how they compare to the real brakes and tires that are on the car. So there are some possibilities for big variances there. If this simulator tire is the equivalent to like a Hoosier R7, full on race slick, and I was on a set of old Nitto NT01s, obviously there's going to be a pretty big discrepancy in tire performance there. Same thing with pads. If they're like a full on race pad and I'm on a Hawk kind of more track friendly but still track street pad, obviously there's a big advantage here as well. I don't have ABS on in the simulator, and I don't have any stability control on in the simulator because my car does not have either of those. So to keep it fair, I was just raw dogging this entire thing, both in real life and in the simulator. So this is my fastest hot lap that I have recorded on video. We're going to go ahead and play, and we'll talk about the times later. And we'll go ahead and we'll do the same thing for the fastest simulator lap. Let's go ahead and watch both laps side by side. There should be a number of things that are pretty apparent. Number one being the total shift in pace. I'm much faster than the simulator. Sorry to spoil it, but there are some other things we can talk about, but we'll talk about that after these two laps. So if it wasn't apparently obvious, the simulator is much faster. We did a 1:14.1 in the sim, and then in real life we did a 1:20.13, which is pretty bad as far as the delta goes, considering a fast lap on that circuit is in the 1 minute 10 range, I think. It's in the pretty low 1 minute range. It's a very short track. It's technical, but it does have a lot of high-speed sections. I think overall it's actually the faster of the two circuits at NJMP. But there were some obvious things different, right? I mentioned that earlier in the video. When I set my fastest lap, it was on a drying line. It had rained that morning. I set it in the afternoon as the track was drying. I was very surprised that I was able to get my fastest lap in sort of the wet, especially my first time on this track. And the curbs are effectively untouchable when they're wet. They're just super slippery. So even on my fastest lap, which I don't unfortunately have the video of, there's a long story there, but even there, the lap time is there. You know, there is obviously huge room for improvement. You can look at the first video and see that like most of the lap I'm a gear up. I probably should have been in third for the majority of the lap. A lot of the times I was in fourth. There are some other things going on with the car, which we'll talk about later, but that's kind of my initial impressions were, you know, to be almost 6.5 seconds slower, or 6 seconds slower, 7 seconds slower on a minute 10, like a 70-second track. I'm 10% off the pace at a minimum. With, in theory, more power. So that was obviously a little frustrating, all things considered. I alluded to it earlier in the video, but there is obviously much less risk involved in the simulator, and I think that shows in my approach to things. Like I mentioned, both days I was there, it was wet. I couldn't really hop the curbs the way I did in the simulator, and I didn't realize I needed to hop the curbs until way later. That turn one curve, at least in my car, if you took too little, it really didn't feel right, but I guess you could take more and it would balance out. That's just one of those things you get with seat time, and I really didn't get a lot of seat time to do this. I ended up with more simulator time than real seat time total because of issues with the car, which again, I mentioned that earlier. So I think just in general, the simulator is easy to take bigger risks because there is no consequences if you crash. There is no blowing an engine up and having consequences there, like I mentioned earlier. So you can see when I'm going through, you know, turns 3 and 4, where it's kind of like one flowing turn that flow in opposite directions. The car is sliding the whole time. I understeer into 3, and then I grip that up, and I kind of oversteer a little bit into 4. Just in general, you could see on the simulator, both on the hand camera, the video of me steering, and the video outside of the car, I'm really driving the car. I'm probably overdriving the car to some point. There is a lot of correction. There's a lot of oversteer. There's a lot of understeer. The real video, there's not much at all. I'm nowhere near the limit of the real tire. And a part of that is a confidence thing that would come with more seat time. You know, there is a long list of driver's excuses that I will end up making in this video without a doubt, but I do think that's part of it. No matter how comfortable I got in the car, even on, you know, Thunderbolt that I drove a lot more, there is always something in the back of your mind that's like, yeah, I really don't want to bend this right here. To totally summarize my thoughts, I think the simulator was a good learning tool because I really learned the layout of the track. I felt what I kind of should be doing, and I think had I done a little bit more consistent of a job with the practicing and making sure it was done in a timely manner in relation to when I was actually going to go to the track, I think it would have been a little more helpful. So like I mentioned earlier in the video, like at the very beginning, I had been working on this video on and off for 3 years. So initially, the plan was to go in 2023 in the fall, and that's when I did all the simulator sessions. So that was in October of 2023. The first day I actually made it out to NJMP to make it on this track was May 2024. When I went out in 2023, I popped a radiator in the staging lane, and that was the end of my day. I didn't make a single inch on track. I limped the car home leaking coolant, and that was that. Then when I get there in May, it rained. I drove the whole day on the drying line, and then in the afternoon, the rain really picked up, and I kind of went home at that point. So I only did 4 full sessions that day. The first 2 sessions were really too wet to record anything. The third session, I went out thinking, like, okay, this will be my first dry session. I'll really push, and I'll film the 4th one. I ended up losing the footage from the 4th session. So that whole day was a wash as far as making the video. I didn't get out to this track again until September of 2024. So it was another 4 months after the first time I went out. Anything I learned that day was effectively gone between the difference in temperature, the difference in conditions. Like, it had rained again that day. It was sprinkling on and off all day. You can see in the video it's super overcast. Anything off the racing line was pretty wet. So I don't feel like I really gave myself a totally fair shot to try to match the simulator time because the conditions weren't the same. I didn't get the same amount of seat time that I gave myself in the simulator versus the actual time in the car. And you may be thinking to yourself, and I would say rightfully so, well, why not give yourself more time before you made this video? When I went in the fall for this final attempt, I finally broke the car and broke it enough that I wasn't going to spend another day on track with it. I had done 5 events this year. It worked completely fine for one single event, and that was the event that I did in the rain. That was the only one that was good, but even then, we still had issues with the car going into reduced engine power. I was having issues with that the entire season. One day I broke a seat. This particular day, the last day I went to the track this year, I managed to kill my alternator after 3 sessions. Or I killed my starter after 3 sessions. I pop started it for the 4th session. I went to get lunch. I killed an alternator, and I had to try to limp the car home. I didn't make it home. And that's when I filmed the outro that I have since deleted, where I was stuck in a Walmart parking lot waiting for someone to come pick me up because my car didn't run anymore. And I was pissed off, and I really just gave my general thoughts on the car and how over it I was. So because of that, I fixed everything. I drove it for a few more months, but it never saw the track again. I put another starter on it because parts are just junk anymore. And I sold the car. So there's a part of me that's upset because I will never be able to confirm, could I match the simulator time without crashing? Could I actually get within 10% of the simulator time? I'll never know unless I buy another one, which I don't think is in the cards for now. So that's frustrating, but that's kind of where we ended up. I don't think I gave myself a fair shot, but the video is a cool concept, so I wanted to finish it even though I don't have the car anymore. I think you get a little more feedback through the simulator once you're familiar with what it feels like. I think there's a big learning curve there. The Corvette in general, to me, does not give a lot of driver feedback until you're really sliding, whether it's understeer or oversteer. I never figured out if that was just my car or not, but I never felt like it was very communicative to me about what the car was doing. A lot of times it just kind of went, and always felt like it was sliding a little bit. So just to kind of summarize everything at the end, I think overall this was pretty cool. It was cool to do, even though I didn't get the results I wanted. I am slower than I expected, and I made a bunch of excuses earlier in the video of why that was. I did learn some things about the car since I started working on this. I thought no ABS in that car just meant no ABS. Just like if you were to drive, an old car with no ABS, you just don't have ABS. It doesn't affect your brake bias or anything, but apparently on the C5s, it does actually change your brake bias. It makes it 70-30, so the rear brakes don't work as much, and that actually makes a ton of sense because, especially in the rain, which both of these videos that I took, or both days I took to go to the track, it was raining or had rained. The track was never perfectly dry. Especially when you're coming under the bridge, you could feel that the rear brakes didn't feel like they were working. You could feel it try to sway around back and forth if you're hard on the brakes. So that made me brake a little earlier, and you could see in the comparison video, I start braking under the bridge, or at least lift under the bridge in the real car. In the sim, I don't hit the brakes, I think, until the 3 or 4 marker. So we're talking, I don't know if those are meters or feet, whatever they are, 200 or 300 feet sooner braking distance. So that's a lot. And just, I think overall, the general conclusion is I probably need more seat time to just overall get my skill up. A little more familiarity with the car and how to push the car correctly and safely would have been helpful. But I think overall, the big thing is I just take way more risks when I don't have real consequences. I play a lot of strategy games. For the little bit of gaming I do, they're all strategy games. I would make very risky strategic decisions because it doesn't actually matter. If I lose a game, I move on. In real life, if I sold everything to be able to buy something else, hoping it'll let me win, that's just a dumb high-risk decision, and I would never do that. Same thing with the simulator. You can see like going into turn two. I don't think I ever touch the brake in the simulator. I think I lift around the 1 or 2 marker and then can just carry the speed into turn three. And it understeers into three, and then I could kind of oversteer into four. I would never actually do that. Really, I mean, at least with the skill level I have now, I would never consider doing that because it's just too high risk. Maybe if I was the only person on the track and I wasn't going to get kicked out for the day if I spun twice, different story. But yeah, so I definitely take a lot more risks that way, and I think 7 seconds would be easy to make up looking at the video. I kind of wish I watched the videos of myself driving while I was at the track so I could kind of get a second perspective on what I needed to do. Even watching them now for the editing process and watching the simulator videos from the editing process, especially the out of car videos, I see tons of time I could pick up. I'm big on use data to make your decisions. I didn't expect it to be as big as it was. I feel like my eyes have been open to a lot of things I didn't see. And if I could go back to the track with the car right now, I'd be faster, without a doubt. But that's life. You can't always win everything. I definitely think I will always regret not fixing the car enough to be able to track it for another season just to see what I could do, because I spent the whole season with the goal of, okay, I want to improve over my 2023 times, and I never did. Well, I did marginally, but they had repaved the circuit. People were like, oh, it's 5 or 6 seconds faster, and like the best I did was beat my original time by like 4/10. Because I constantly had car problems, whether it was seats breaking, alternators breaking, clutches exploding, car catching on fire. The list goes on. My diff making tons of noise, my power steering pump exploding. Just every time I went out, something happened, and it totally just burned me out on the car, because it sucks to go out to the track and spend $400 to be there for the day and have it break in a session or break in 2 sessions, or like it acted up and you want to push it anyway and you're paranoid the whole time about, is it going to survive or is it going to break? Am I going to have to get towed home? You don't know. So that kind of ruined the whole season, but I'm glad I got to make this video. I think it's a cool comparison. Hopefully you all like it. It took a lot of effort to edit all these videos. So leave some thoughts in the comments. Like, I know I'm slow, so you don't have to remind me. Like, I know it is what it is. Like, I don't care. But, if you leave some thoughts and other comments on what we should do next. So thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoy it. See you guys next time.